Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode with Crypto with English, with your host, Adam English. I'd like to introduce a very special guest and a friend of mine, Robert Aitchison. He's the managing partner of the UK-based Automated Markets. It's an innovative, disruptive company that uses distributed ledger technology for supply chains, which I have to say is very, very relevant right now, especially with the supply chain crisis that we're suffering here in the United States and elsewhere. So, furthermore, combining his experience as a neurophysicist and entrepreneur, Robert has held many executive roles in the tech industry. So, bringing forth his talents from cloud tech, AI, cybersecurity, and blockchain, we're going to get into the weeds of it today in terms of distributed technology and ledgers, NFTs, AIs, and perhaps can we decentralize towards a better future? And that is the topic and the gist of what we're going to investigate today. So, Robert, thank you very much for coming on today. I really do appreciate it. First and foremost, provide a little bit of color and context to your background and automated markets.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Adam. Thanks again for having me. It's always nice to chat, and we chatted quite a few
Absolutely.
times now, and
Oh, yeah.
it's always been enjoyable. It's always gone on much longer than we
Yes.
thought. Yes, what about me? So I guess I'm a kind of physicist first, kind of lapsed to a certain extent. I go way back. I originally was a kind of research scientist, worked for British Telecom Research. We back in the 80s, working on high-speed semiconductors and various other aspects of design. I'm a member of Institute of Engineering and Technology. But I guess a lot of my sort of really recent career has been in business and business focused. Last sort of 3 years, I've been working with another partner, formed a company called Automated Markets. And really, we're all about, I guess, the business of blockchain. I kind of like to joke. There's kind of a UK. Unfortunately, he's passed away, but there was a lady who was married to a magician over here, and the joke was, what attracted you to the this millionaire magician? And I always think, what attracted you to the $1 trillion blockchain markets? Well, there's a bit more than money at the end of the day. Yeah, I mean, we've been working in quite a few interesting things. So I guess the biggest project we did was 2.5 years ago. We worked with a big construction company, and actually quite a lot of the construction industry in the UK, looking at really blockchain and construction and how it could be deployed. And that came about really as a result of something, or really a competition we won for the training industry, because there were some new laws and legislations come in here, really due to a big disaster that happened called Grenfell, in which a tower essentially caught light and burned incredibly rapidly and killed a very large number of people. And really what happened at the end of the day was it was found that the cladding on the tower was really wrong, and it had been tested, but a great deal of the work had been hidden. It wasn't traceable, and really it should never been attached to the tower. So the entire building industry and came around with the report of the government called the Hackett Report. And some of the work we did was based around how you could potentially trace things better using blockchain. So we did quite a lot of work on that, and that was really interesting. And then we've done some other things. We worked on quantum cybersecurity. That was great fun. Really looking at how systems can be made secure from quantum networks. And then, more recently, we've been really much more involved with public blockchain. So we've been working on, NFTs and, which is quite a big thing, and the metaverse and various other bits of technology. And it's been a lot of fun. We're finally getting towards doing something with a partner. It's an auction house early next year, and that's quite exciting. So yeah, we're well into the metaverse now, which is quite exciting for somebody that's been around in this sort of business for quite a while.
That's awesome. By the way, that's a great summary and a synopsis of your background and some of the projects you were working on. So, if we were to start broader and then kind of move narrower, how do you feel that a decentralized future will make essentially a better, I guess, more fairer society? Including, whether it's NFTs, whether it's the metaverse, whether it's blockchains, like an
Yeah.
overall, like how
Yeah,
would that?
the big thing, I suppose.
Yes,
Yeah, I think ultimately it's this ownership of identity and data. I mean, at the end of the day, if you consider Web3 to be the next generation of the internet, it's how you interact with that universe, if you like. Forget VR and AR, which are really interesting, but if you
right,
just think of you sign up to Facebook or Google. I mean, we use Microsoft. But it's a great system for many things. But essentially, you're in a big centralized world. So you spend a lot of your time, we all still do, within a centralized systems. So once you're in those systems, you're in, Outlook, or you're in Google, or you're in Facebook, and really you're passing over a great deal of your information to those platforms. I mean, if you pick on, I'm not picking on Facebook for any reason, but if you look at what they've done recently, it's been incredibly fascinating because here's a company with essentially 4 billion users. I mean, it's a staggering
right,
number. It really is. It's more than half the planet, and they have now rebranded as Meta. So for anyone to take that step, especially a company the size of Facebook, is a huge thing, and they've done it because they want to ensure that the future involves them in a big way. So if you analyze a little bit further, what does that mean? Well, I think what it really means is you're going to have a centralized metaverse and then a decentralized metaverse.
interesting,
At the end of the day, Facebook has a huge system environment which is invested in. They haven't done that so that they can chuck all that away. So when you step into that metaverse, now at the minute, if you do it with Oculus or something, they do actually have fairly strict rules currently around. I think they currently ban the advertising within that environment. However, it's well known that they do things like they map the environment, and they kind of have to do it for certain reasons.
right,
And they track your eyes, and they do other things like that. And essentially, you have to sort of give that data away. So I'm happy with you having that.
yeah,
Now, the whole point of the metaverse and Web3, as we see it, certainly, is this is one where your identity is your own and the data is your own. So when you step into it and you transfer information into the metaverse, you do it on the basis of knowing what you're actually giving to the network. So in the case of NFTs and how they work in that environment, it's actually quite cool because you may step into that environment as an avatar, as a pure NFT with certain attributes, but you know what those attributes are before you step into that world. You don't have to read some, 30 or 40 pages of legalese
right,
before you step into that world. You actually know what you're doing when you step into that. So I think that to me is that it's that user friendly web that is the big thing. But of course the issue, not the issue, but the thing about the metaverse of Web3 is that we're still really, really at the very early stage. You're kind of Internet 99 or something. Sounds like an old TV
right,
series I used to watch, Space 99. But
yeah,
you're kind of at that sort of you're kind of at that stage. So we're really at a case of stepping into this environment and forming all the links between it. So one of the companies I follow quite a lot is Outlier Ventures, and they've been putting together sort of links for a Web3 that would work in some sort of environment, and defining the pieces that where you can interoperate and not effectively lose your identity or lose yourself. I don't. We're not a Ready Player One time yet,
oh
but
yeah,
but
that was a
who
movie.
knows what there, and that's kind of interesting. I mean, so big picture stuff. And but by the way, I mean, I think I mentioned to you when we discussed it earlier. I mean, the thing about entry into this world is what are the barriers for anyone? So, I mean, we've been talking to people at the minute who really are not at all savvy with anything to do with Web3, and they don't live and breathe it like we do. And,
Right,
I was talking to them about, they kind of said, well, where's the data backed up? It's not really a backup. It's
right,
decentralized. We use
right,
IPFS. It's a different way of looking at things. So it's really to try and explain to people what is going on with the system and how it actually works. I mean, if you could make a coin out of TCP/IP, you'd be a multi-trillionaire. Well, it's having all this the little things of the Web3 sliced up and then put into place. But then, people sharing with the value of the of that Web3 interface. It's not about, if you look at Facebook or Microsoft or things like that, the power and everything about those platforms is really centralized within quite a few people. I mean, Facebook has a governance board, but essentially it's actually centralized with quite a few people. So if you look at the web and the emergence of these things called DAOs, the distributed autonomous organizations, is a really interesting thing, because you have people able to potentially vote and influence these things and via something that's different to shareholding, which can be highly restrictive in the centralized world.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I would say for audience members, viewers who are just starting to get their feet wet regarding blockchain and non-fungible tokens and are looking to explore this area, Robert, how would you describe a non-fungible token to the average, let's say, layperson on the street? If, let's say, they asked you, what exactly is an NFT? What's the deal with this phenomenon? Like, what words would come to you to perhaps communicate that the best?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you look at it from the point of view of art, which is what we're kind of dealing with here.
I was actually just about to ask that next. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good way. If you think of well, let's talk about a fungible token first. So
Sure.
And essentially a £5 note or a $10 bill is a fungible piece. They're all exactly the same. Ignore the serial numbers and all that sort of stuff, but they're really all the same. They all have the same value. They all have the same look and feel, and they're all completely interchangeable. Whereas a non-fungible token is completely non-interchangeable. So if I have the Mona Lisa, there should be only one Mona Lisa.
Right.
It's not exchangeable for, well, you could try and exchange it for a Picasso or something like that, but it's that idea of its singular uniqueness. And obviously the big thing about it, if we're talking about art, is that it's purely digital. So we can absolutely trace the provenance of where it is, what it is, and who owns it. So that's what's rather interesting, and has really grown this massive expansion, because this uniqueness of what an NFT is, and this traceability and this ownership is highly desirable. We have an emotional interaction with things that we own. It's pretty simple, really.
And that's key to highlight as well. So that's good that you brought that up. There is a
huge
amount of emotional energy driving this.
It's the emotional thing, and it's kind of interesting. There's a bit of a FOMO thing as well, and you have to be careful. There's a negative impact on these side. I've kind of been reading a little bit recently about NFTs and mental health, and people getting a little bit too obsessed.
Right.
I think you have to be careful with that, the cryptoverse as well, because if you look at it, it's so big, and there are so many opportunities, but there's also so many scams, and there's also so many. There's this sort of thing that went on at the beginning of the internet. Buy my company, or here's a business plan in the back of a napkin. It's not exactly the way you want to go all the time. So you have to be a little bit careful, and I think restricting your interests and focus can be really useful. I mentioned art there, and we're involved in that quite heavily now. But we're also kind of looking at the curation route, which is, I guess the opposite to a great deal of the marketplace at the minute, not all of it, but it's a very interesting field if you look at how the rareness of things and what they are, and whether you want to own them. There's only 1,000 CryptoPunks, and they're each worth $500,000.
Oh
each.
Yeah, some incredible amounts. Some of them up in the millions and hundreds of thousands, and celebrities are buying them like crazy now.
They're all being bought like crazy. I mean, you can own fractional CryptoPunks. There's all sorts of things you can do around that. So it's rather interesting. Now, not the issue, but the focus maintains. That set of CryptoPunks is rather interesting, from the point that it has its own DeFi world as well. You can actually you can spot that thing, and you can create a DeFi asset around that CryptoPunk. And this is what's really interesting if you start to link this back to Web3 and the metaverse, and stepping into a new decentralized world. think about big picture stuff. If I own one of those CryptoPunks and I step into this world and I say, well, actually, can I borrow something against my CryptoPunk, and then you'll potentially own it in some way through smart contracts.
Right.
But I want to do other things. I maybe want some other sort of currency, and actually that currency may be another cryptocurrency. You may never go back into the fiat world. You may just stay within the DeFi world, which
Right.
makes it very interesting from a legal position, because how are they going to tax you?
Right.
What is a government going to do? How's it going to view that world? And I think it's a space where governments know this, that the technology goes far ahead of government legislation, the law, and that's another really interesting sort of aspect of what's going on at the minute.
Yeah,
As
and
you've been covering your
yes,
podcast.
sorry. I'm sorry?
Sorry, I just says as you've been covering your podcast. Obviously.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a topic worth worth investigating, and I think worth exploring, and definitely deserves even more visibility. And it's quite visible right now as it is. But I'll have to say one of the more poignant examples of this decentralized future is in the world of art. So instead of I guess you could say the traditional, I guess you could say art houses and brokerage like Sotheby's, for example, now you have people essentially buying these art pieces in the form of non-fungible tokens effectively from exchanges without essentially that middle party, that broker, so to say, without that middleman. uh you know do you think that's ultimately going to make for, I guess you could say, a better art industry or fine art industry? Because the NFTs have the benefit of having essentially that cryptographic signature, I guess, representing its authenticity, so to say. So it's not simply taking a picture and putting a JPEG out there. Obviously there's more layers to this. And I will say, with a lot of maybe the over centralization we've had for maybe the past 50 years, there's been many examples where that has failed. For instance, whether it's the central banks of the United States and the UK, for instance, these, I guess you could say, these central banks were responsible for creating uniformity in the currency, in both the notes and coinage, and also apparently maintaining healthy rates as well. So, in order to prevent things like inflation, hyperinflation, or deflation. Now, I guess that's clearly not been the case, to say the very least. So it almost looks like right now, maybe people are more trustworthy or more reliable than I think maybe systems would like to think so far.
Yeah. I think it's a kind of interesting world. I mean, obviously people are also stepping into the crypto side, because if you look at a fiat asset, if you look at inflation as it currently stands, if you look at the interaction with a bank or any sort of security deposit you have, there's a big issue. I mean, banks and certainly Central Europe now have negative interest rates. So you pay to put your things in the bank and for the bank to keep it. And that's probably coming here. It wouldn't surprise me if it was here down the line fairly soon. Now, there's an inverse within the crypto world, which is, you can stake these coins, these tokens, if you like, and they can do work, and you get money for that work.
Yes.
And the rates, even some of the bad rates, are infinitely better than you will find in anything that a bank has.
Right.
Now, obviously, there's a huge risk regarding the volatility of the product. However, if you look at volatility in cryptocurrencies, it has come down hugely. Even the recent changes that have occurred, there's been a great decline in that. I mean, Ethereum and its new system has been burning quite rapidly. I think 3 million Ethereum tokens have been burnt. So there's an interesting dynamic as far as the entire token sort of industry is concerned in terms of the future, because I think with the values having gone up, now, even though they've come down a little bit recently, it's now starting to become very interesting. And I think, as we've already been discussing offline, the legal side is catching up, and the current US bill is being debated because there's quite a big chunk of that with digital assets and crypto as well. And I believe the Republicans have tried to make some changes to that in order to make it a little bit more open.
Right.
So it's a really interesting. Sorry, I've maybe diverged a bit.
No, by all means.
It's a fascinating thing, because some of the people that I follow that are, people that have made very much great amounts of money in the fiat world, they pretty much will step completely into the crypto world because they don't see many benefits within being in the fiat world because of the opportunities that exist within crypto.
Right. And it's great that you mentioned wallets. Some of these wallets that are out there, they have APYs, annual
Mm.
percentage rates, so to say, of over 10% and sometimes
Yeah.
even over 25%. And these are
Mm.
for actually well-known, even more credible crypto assets as well. So,
Mm.
looking at this, even keeping in mind the volatility, it's actually quite worth it to at least attempt to stake some tokens at this point, because I don't see anywhere else that's even offering rates even close to that. Like you were mentioning, even the bad rates are good. Like on the low end for some of these wallets at like 5%, that is still infinitely better than what you could say a lot of rates are, whether it's in the US or Canada or Western Europe and the UK. Like 5%, 8%, I'll take it.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No, basically they advertise things like, oh, get 1.5% for a
Yeah,
year,
it's ridiculous.
and like, woohoo, and then you just get nothing. I mean, I think my bank, most of my accounts I get nothing. I mean, there are obviously the advantages of tax that if there are things over here called ISAs, etc., that they don't attract any tax. So
Right,
I mean, any growth is effectively not taxed. So these are, but they're strictly limited, and you can't really hold a great deal within those
right,
assets. So, but I think that the bigger point is, if you look at the US legislation and UK and Europe and everywhere else, is that the governments are driving towards a competitive element and an element of saying, yes, we do want to do this. If you look at it, I mean, the digitization of currency is already occurring,
right,
and whether it involves blockchain or not, I'd be very surprised if it didn't in some sort of form, ultimately. But certainly, digitization of currency makes a great deal of sense anyway, because you can track and tax as well. I don't know what to
right,
call it. It gets really easy. The government just pushes a button and it sees what's
right.
happening. You don't have to write those things. So, but that's that's where we're heading. It's I mean, during the pandemic only accelerated that, because the use of money declined rapidly, and although it's come back a bit, it's still gone into a steep decline.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
And it's funny that you mentioned the checking accounts. Like I will get some junk mail sometimes. I guess you could say uh, checking and savings account, or these high yield checking accounts, whether it's from
mm.
Charles Schwab or elsewhere. 1.5%. That's a high yield checking account, right?
Well, 1.5 is not bad, really. I guess you'd probably
Right,
take that rate here. But obviously, if you look at inflation currently, it's stated
right.
as between 4 and 5. It's probably a great deal higher.
Yeah,
If you really put everything in the bucket, you're getting wiped out. You
yes.
have to be trying to make above 6 or 7 just to be standing still, and people
Yeah,
forget
that's a very
how.
good point. Yeah, probably about 6 to 7% just to be
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
it's huge. I mean, if you look at compound inflation, will completely rip everything apart. You're talking about having your savings within less than 10 years, something like that, at current rates. I mean, that's how bad it is. And things, people are saying, oh, things will get better. Well, people I know in the supply chain, certainly here, that deal with large amounts, have been told 2023, 2024 before things are done.
Right.
There are huge systemic problems. They're not things, can't blame individual governments or anything. We just have systemic problems at the minute.
Right. And
But
there's another interesting topic out there. So the digitally excluded. So,
mhm.
here in the US, 9 out of 10 people are not involved in crypto markets, cryptocurrency, or anything, blockchain related. And I think in fact, if I was to even go outside New York City, this can be in Miami, this can be in the Midwest. If I was to
Mhm.
even try to give out Ethereum or Bitcoin, I don't think most people would want to take it. There is still, yeah,
I'll
there
take
is,
it.
yeah, I'll definitely take it. Yeah, please. Here's my wallet address. But how do we how do we bridge the messaging or the information gap to get more people on board and start actually using this in like everyday commerce, like maybe like we're seeing in some parts of Western Africa or in El Salvador, where people are starting to use it in their everyday lives. There are some hiccups and some obstacles, but you see people now trying to buy groceries with like Bitcoin, or petroleum
Yeah.
and gasoline for their cars with it.
Well, yeah, it's really interesting, that point. So I was listening to another podcast. I must do some work to the podcast, but it was a fascinating one by quite a large investment company, and they'd started looking at crypto because they'd done work in Nigeria, and in Nigeria, essentially, the fluctuations in their own currency was so great. Nigeria is a big country; it's very dynamic, has a lot of tech. Was such that the number of wallets, the amount of crypto being traded, accelerated rapidly. So it's something like 25% of Nigerians now have crypto wallets, and that's a
Wow.
lot of people.
Yeah.
So that was when the investor thought, well, why am I dealing with a lot of fiat stuff? Let's go to crypto in the
Right.
metaverse. So they started investing in that. So it was driven actually by as I said, the large fluctuations in their own currency. So people thought, I can actually be more stable in cryptocurrencies than I can in my own sort of,
Right. Using a Nairas, I believe, or something like
yeah,
that.
that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, so they kind of tripped to this world. Now, does that mean people here and in the US and various other places will be attracted? I think it will be a factor. I think people will start to understand. I've been talking to people that are, really essentially non-technical people, really not interested from a technical viewpoint, but they're interested in what is being discussed and where it is actually going. So if you look at the people today, the younger people, because I'm not, I mean, they're now using gaming and they're now getting much more
Oh
familiar
yeah.
with this sort of universe. Now, if you think of exclusion, what do I mean by that? I probably mean by people or maybe a bit older, or they're certainly not in the environment where they want to be bothered with that. Look at a different sort of view of the world, and I think from that point of view, there has to be more regulation and probably a little bit more law clarification for those people, and a little bit more education, and it will take a little bit of time. If you look at places like Africa, there's about a 98% penetration of mobile phones. It's extremely high,
Yeah.
and there's quite a big distrust of the traditional banking system. So the idea that blockchain, and when it came around and its original remit, which was to cut out the middleman, and particularly for the banking industry, they just went, yeah, tick, yeah, I'll have that. It was a no-brainer to them. So
Right.
it's really to do with the environment. Obviously, within our environment in the US and the UK and Europe, we have a big trust of the banks, for good or bad, and we don't want to step out of that market space, because really, if you're dealing outside of the traditional banking system within our environments, then it's are you safe? Are you not? Are you secure? And we understand about these things, but a great deal of people don't, and they haven't been
Right.
educated about it. So I think that will change. And then one of the other things about exclusion and digital exclusion is people that just can't access this sort of stuff anyway. I mean, if you're dealing with the UK government, I don't know how much it is in the US, then there's quite a lot of things that you can only do digitally. I mean, you kind of really need to have an app for your COVID stuff, or you need it to interface
Right.
with the government. And a lot of people find that difficult. I mean, and then add on to that, imagine you're disabled. So one of the guys that I've worked with a bit in the past and still know, and he's a great guy, a guy called Lord Holmes, or Chris Holmes, and he worked a bit on our construction stuff, and he's the vice chair of the all-party parliamentary group for blockchain, and he's also blind, and he's also a Paralympian, so he hasn't
Wow.
let things get in his way.
Yeah, to
He's
say the
actually
least.
the most decorated Paralympian, I think, in the world.
Wow.
But his blindness obviously takes him away from certain digital environments. So he's been a big advocate. And he's also a lawyer, so he's been a big advocate of making sure that digital legislation that goes through Parliament and that gets passed to the Lords has an aspect of discovery around how does this affect disabled people? What does it actually
Right.
mean? It's not all negative. So as we look into this metaverse and the AR and the VR, these really rich environments, there is something to be said for a kind of Ready Player One type thing,
Right.
where
Right.
it's not it's not dystopian where actually if I'm disabled or even I'm fully able but I'm locked inside an environment because of COVID, I may want to escape to that world, and it might be
Right.
quite a nice world for a period of time. 24/7 is probably bad, but it's it's not all black and white.
Yeah, and that's a very solid point. Would you say, based on your experience and expertise, would gamification be one of the mechanisms that actually bring in people who are essentially digitally challenged or digitally excluded? I think within all age ranges, it seems like gaming, regardless, is able to get a hold of each of those demographics. You could be a toddler, you can be in high school, you could be a working professional. There's always ways to get people to participate in
Mhm.
games, without a doubt.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I completely agree. In fact, I did some work in gamification as well, and I still really enjoy it. In fact, I invented a poker game once,
Oh, nice.
and I do love games and various things like that. But who doesn't? I mean, who doesn't? I mean, there's some amazing games that outside of the spectrum, and it's a great way to get people involved. I mean, obviously there are things like gambling. I mean, I've been talking about poker, and you
Right.
have to be a little bit careful about how you interact with that gaming world.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, yeah, I mean, I think gamification is a great idea. I mean, clearly, a lot of the NFT world and is now being tied into the gamification world, and games themselves, as Engine and all these other environments, they are linking the cryptoverse into the gaming space, and
Yeah.
making the gaming space richer because you can, there is this exchange of value, and you don't have to steal daddy's wallet or whatever in
Right.
football. But well, you may do other things, of course, but
Right.
but actually within that metaverse, it's actually a bit better controlled because of the way it works. So, I think gamification is a great way for people to step into that environment, and yeah, I completely agree with that.
Okay. And just to step back a little bit, uh, the I guess you could say the tool or the mechanism of curation. So let's say if we're talking about the NFT art market, for instance, uh,
Hmm.
grading and judging quality. Is there a role for curation in the art market? Because right now it seems very subjective as far as where people's tastes are and where prices go. So there really isn't any type of uniform standard of quality, so to say. And I think maybe that's where some of the controversy comes in, as far as NFT art.
Yeah.
Some of this seems outrageous. Why would people pay millions of dollars for this? Like, I hear that, those anecdotal comments all the time. So I wanted to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. So that, I mean, something we've been quite deeply immersed in for the
Yeah.
last 6 months or so, and it's a really interesting point because I mean, clearly after the big Beeple thing,
Right.
everyone thought 60 million. I'll have some of that. There
Yeah,
was a huge
exactly.
rush to the website, and to be fair, Beeple had spent, I can't remember, more than 3 years, I think, developing his profile,
Right.
really engaging with a big community to talk about what he was doing, and he was really an artist. It was not just, hey, here we
Right.
go
He
in
didn't
for
come
the
out of left
money.
field. There's
It
actually a
came out of left
significant
field,
history and
but many
backstory to what
people
he
that
did.
have been in NFTs well before me and others really understood what they were doing, and there's really something of value there. I mean, so to your point, it's kind of an interesting point because NFTs themselves have exploded into this wider world. I mean, first and foremost, I think it is very much a kind of world of fame, as it were. So there are people doing things. You have to be very careful. I mean, I don't know if you noticed, but Quentin Tarantino had an NFT, or was a bit of an NFT drop around some special stuff for Pulp Fiction, which is clearly a very interesting thing because
Right.
of who he is. But obviously, he didn't own the rights to that. So
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
so he was immediately slapped with a lawsuit saying, "No, you ain't."
Yeah.
So that's a great thing with the NFTs to a certain extent because you do have this degree of ownership, and those things are being caught with somebody famous at the minute. Now that doesn't mean to say that that's going to happen in the future. But anyway, I think I swerved away from your point slightly. But just
No, by
going
all
back to
means.
that, go back to the original thing about curation, etc. Yeah, I mean, I mean, from the point of view of the artist, I think you've now got this massive sea of product. I mean, OpenSea, etc., which is out there, and people kind of go, okay, I may collect this, I may collect the next thing. What does it mean to me? And it's kind of interesting. I think the person that's looking at the NFT has to answer that question themselves. So, I mean, I've been collecting art for years, and some of it's gained in value, and some of it isn't worth anything. But some of the stuff that isn't worth anything, I still have an emotional connection to, which isn't to do with how much I paid for it. It's to do with other things. And I think
Right.
that's the interesting point around NFTs. It's around the fact that you may have an emotional connection with an artist due to the association. You may be part of a community, which is true for a number of these artists. Or you may be part of some other physical link to the artist. You followed them for some time. I mean, I remember going to see Damien Hirst being dragged for the first time to see, sharks in huge blocks of perspex, and I thought, what the hell? However, I kind of got it after a bit, and I began to understand where he was coming from and what he was trying to do, and
Right.
how his art had developed, and I felt the curator had passed on a certain value to me, if that makes a certain amount of sense.
Yeah.
So I think curation itself is really interesting. I mean, if you look at super rare or known origin, these are effectively curated NFT sites. So if you're an artist, you have to go and you have to sort of get to those sites and get into them. But I
Right.
know a large number of artists that have been disillusioned with the larger platforms, and I think there is a broader curation that can occur, that can exist outside of those platforms as well. So but I do believe in curation, and I do believe it has a place within space. Is it the only thing? No, absolutely no. I think that the great thing about Web3 and all the things we've discussed is that you can have that individual relationship with the artist, and you can have that direct link. There may not be any curation at all, but I believe there's quite a big place for it. And I've spent quite a bit of time recently looking at galleries, physical galleries, for artists, mainly because a number of those artists, when I have a discussion with the curator, will have NFTs, but they have not really kind of, if you like, able to promote them, or they don't know how to interact with that sort of particular world. And I think that's quite an interesting point as well.
Well, I mean, that's a very solid explanation. Now that I think about it as well, it seems like curation, some form of it, is eventually going to essentially manifest regardless, especially
Mm.
as more and more artists become visible and their profiles become larger. And let's say they have a significant client base, and essentially developing emotional connections and tastes for certain works of art. It seems like maybe through some sort of digital osmosis, there is going to be some sort of curative kind of standard for people to essentially lean on, and maybe to ascertain artists or ascertain certain types of work. So it
Well, yeah, I
seems.
mean, it's rather interesting. I mean, you mentioned gamification before, and I think that's a really interesting kind of link potentially into the worlds, because the thing about NFTs is they're already beyond just that physical aspect. I mean, they have other aspects as well. In fact, some of the technology we're developing is to imbue them with other assets, and this is
Right.
not unique. There are other people doing this sort of thing. There's NFTs related to musical works of art, and the ability for you then to essentially browse, essentially become found within the metaverse, but within a different platform. So if I take the equivalent, if I go into Spotify, which is a centralized system, and there's a couple of things around that. I mean, number one, how the hell do you find things? Well, Spotify curates stuff for you, and it's actually quite good at it. When I go on there, however, as you're probably well aware, the value to the artist is really incredibly small, unless you're a big artist with an NDA with Spotify or whatever. Then you ain't getting paid much. You're getting your
Right.
standard point, no, 38 cents or whatever the hell it is. Now, what is interesting, as I mentioned, there's a thing called Open Meta DAO, and Outlier Ventures, which is quite a big VC firm over here, they're starting to connect quite a lot of artists and then put them onto new platforms. Deadmau5 spun one, and Snoop Dogg's in it as well, whereby there's that direct relationship with the artist and basically NFTs as well. So that obviously they're big, but they're starting to pull other artists into that world, and then really you get this situation where the artist gets a bit more money. So, you can curate, you can get onto these systems, and you can even own potentially a part of the rights to that product. So you can make money from the artist itself, and that's quite an exciting thing. Whereby, if you think of all the ways you can capture value, an NFT can be a great way to pass on value to other people. So through your art. So and then pass that value back as well. So as an artist, you get, if that increases in value, you get some of that back.
Wow, very well said. And as far as the metaverse, who will own it, or is it possible for either an individual or an organization or a consortium or a collective of individuals or organizations to own it? So for instance, does the metaverse encounter the same vulnerabilities where essentially maybe cryptocurrencies may encounter, or even fiats themselves, where you really have a few whales, so to say, steer the influence in the direction in many ways?
Yeah. I think that's clearly probably Facebook's thing. I think ultimately we will probably have a centralized and a decentralized metaverse. So we're still in the starting gate, I think, and it's going to be interesting to see how it all develops. I mean, as you're probably aware, Facebook had its kind of Libra coin pre-announcement.
Right.
It didn't really go anywhere. It was all
No.
shelved, etc. However, that stuff is still sitting there, and I would be incredibly surprised if something like Libra did not pop its head up again within Facebook's own metaverse, and then became some exchange of value within it. However, you've got this issue, this fundamental issue of thinking about things, which is the big one, which is centralized versus decentralized. And in the centralized universe, you ultimately, you're held within there, and getting out of that universe can be difficult because you've given it away anyway.
Right.
So you no, I'm not saying that they can't mix and match aspects of that, but it becomes very difficult because of the principle of how those organizations are governed, which is the really interesting part when you look at distributed autonomous organizations. And in fact, there are the things that are now really building in value. I mentioned the Open Meta DAO, which is quite interesting. It's not happened yet, but there's this idea that you begin to control your own universe, and you have a vote to say, I don't want you to do this, and I do want you to do that. Now, I think the issue with DAOs at the minute is that a lot of them are quite complicated, and people might not be bothered to vote. I mean, ultimately, people are quite lazy. I mean, I remember quite a few years back, I got involved with a project which was interactive film, and you might have seen Charles Brooker's Black Mirror episode where you got to choose the way the drama get directed.
Right. Yeah. I've watched most of Black Mirror episodes too. So yes.
Yeah. So it's a really interesting experiment. So you can choose the way the drama, and you have to shoot so many things. Many different ways the drama went. But go back to my point. There was a lot of work done around then. Actually, it's been done quite a lot around interactive drama, and people realized that TV was cinema. It's still just a sit back thing. I just want to just throw it at me, Whereas gaming is obviously leaned forward, and they really are quite devolved. So I think at the end of the day, it's going to be interesting with DAOs to see who wants to become involved with them, who wants to influence things, or is it a case of like the Facebook thing? Oh, I don't care that you have all my data. Do what you like it. Just like, I just want to use this.
Right.
Thing to do this. So it's going to be who are going to be the gatekeepers. And I think in the top of all of that, you've got the law. You can't step into a completely decentralized world and decide everything is going to work within there without some form of legal aspect overseeing the things that go on in terms of things like KYC, AML. They still, they're still important. Sovereign identity is a big thing within that world as well. So.
Right. And kind of dovetailing off that as well. So, regulation in the metaverse. How how can regulation really have a role? Because the metaverse is essentially going to be a parallel world to our actual, I guess you could say, living and physical interactions. So I think there may be some ethical issues, I guess, as far as sovereignty, human rights, and privacy and things like that. But it seems inevitably there's going to have to be some sort of control or some sort of regulatory aspect to that. I guess the question would be where to start, because I guess if we have a metaverse that is seemingly infinite and random, much like our own world is, I mean, that sounds like a monolith to overcome, to say the least.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's simple aspects. I mean, security, privacy, child pornography, etc. I mean, you can't supersede those sort of laws because they
Right.
apply everywhere. But I think the bigger thing is that the aspect of how money is controlled and how exchange of value is controlled. At the end of the day, governments work because they have this thing called tax, and they can tax us all, and they can
Right.
say, effectively that is what they're interested in. I think what will be interesting to see is as you get a lot more exchange of value, and as you're aware, there is the Securities Commission is looking at how things, what things are. I mean, NFTs aren't strictly classified as securities, however, many of them have that aspect, and I would be really surprised if you don't come under increasing review, because if you pass value, if you can earn some sort of revenue stream from an NFT other than this thing that you exchange, then really at the end of the day it's you are creating some sort of securitized product which is subject to certain rules and regulations, and then there's how is this system managed, how do you control it? I mean, Facebook itself and everybody, Twitter, they struggle with control, because how do you control billions of people and billions of newscasts and bots on top of that and AI on top of that? I mean, AI systems that all of these people have is extremely advanced, but it still isn't advanced enough. I mean, I think Facebook hired another 10,000 people just to look at what's going on within the various groups, and these groups pop up like this. Now, there's nothing really at the end of the day for those groups to pop up within the metaverse, and they can have their own little voting controls, and they can often create some bizarre, anti-something faction that really is maybe a good thing, terrorism or whatever. So how you control these things has to be tested, I think, and it probably will be tested in court to some extent. But the same rules apply, and it's going to be interesting to see how those things roll out, because as we interact more and more with the digital world, whether it's centralized or not, the fact of the matter is we spend more time within digital worlds. It's just we've done that since the pandemic. I mean, it's interesting to see where we're going to go.
Absolutely. And as far as non-fungible tokens, where do you believe the next frontier will be on this? Where do you think that non-fungible tokens will evolve into next? Now that we have all of the, I guess you could say, progress and promise, being shown in art and music and gaming, where do you feel the next, I guess, big boom for this will be?
Oh, I think you mentioned. I think it's the gaming side, almost certainly, and the link between those universes. Although I do think this using NFTs as collateral is quite a big one as well. It's quite an interesting but I think this ability to take. I mean, a lot of people that are collecting the art are using examples. That it is a great step into that. There's also the use within sports and collecting and all these other things which have expanded. I mean, there isn't. I mean, even over here in Europe, there's not a major soccer team that doesn't have an interaction with something in NFTs. I mean, it's there
Right.
already. Barcelona, Man U, City, whatever, they've all got it. And that's really interesting. And I think that will drive people. You mentioned what will drive people into it. Those sort of things are going to drive into that sort of universe. I mean, for our point of view, we're really interested in how NFTs can control other things other than art, although that's one of the primary things. We're looking at how do we control value? How do we actually keep them safe? I mean, it's all very well saying that I've got my NFT and whatever, but that's really just a pointer. I mean, and people are using Filecoin and things, but what happens if I don't spend the Filecoin? Where does it go?
Right.
So you have to think about deeper things in terms of how you keep your assets safe and how you use your assets. So, and then beyond that, we're looking at the value around NFTs, which I think will grow. I mentioned music there, and I think there's other things you can add into the NFT universe, so it can have this other, these increasingly flexible elements for something that is highly unique but can drive value within for an artist as well, which is really interesting because it's quite hard to be an artist. It's like
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's a difficult thing to drive value in and to make money from. And with a more direct connection, it's whether you believe in that 1,000 fan things. If you can make $100 from 1,000 fans over a year, that's $100,000. Well, it may be possible, and I hope it's possible for more artists to pursue an artistic career because they can do it within this universe. Really.
Well said. And going off that, so in the NFT art world, whether from the perspective of a buyer or even a an artist, where does one start? I mean, I think if time is any metric, fine art especially has proven itself for a very long time, hundreds of years, as a good asset that in many ways appreciates over time. I think the numbers in that industry speak for itself. So if an individual is looking to break into NFT art, if you're looking to be a buyer, an investor, you want to, I guess you could say, jump on the next hot trend that may make you a lot of money. Or if you're an artist, you're looking to get your feet wet in this world, but there's so many platforms, there's so many artists out there, and there's just so much information overload out there. I would imagine that may actually deter some artists from trying
Yeah,
to
no,
get
I think
started.
it does. I mean, I know
How would
quite a
one get
few
started?
artists. Yeah, I think quite a few artists have been turned off, and that's unfortunate because they have really interesting art.
Yeah.
And it becomes that thing. And unfortunately, you kind of have to go back to that. Anything to do with investment, whether it's time or art, is you have to do your research and you have to
Yes.
sort of look at different things. So it's kind of interesting. NFT London was massively oversubscribed in a recent event. I think it was like 8 times. But what was interesting is out of that, they spawned lots of side channels. So even though they could only get 200 or 300 people into the event, they had like a couple thousand
Wow.
outside it, meeting in pubs and things. And all
Yeah.
those people were discussing artists, discussing what they were collecting, discussing it. So you have to get involved with the groups and the Discord and Telegram channels,
Got it.
etc. You could follow us because we were in that world, and we're starting to get
Yeah.
involved with things that we'll announce fairly early next year, Q1 next year. So that's something to look at. And there's things like NFT Canon or Art Blocks. There's quite a few compilation sites out there that'll tell you, what's going on. Or they have loads of articles. So I wouldn't necessarily go to the big sites straight away. But have a look at the rarer ones, and look at the big galleries as well. Look at what Sotheby's and Christie's have done, and some of the artists that have sprung off of those, and some of those sort of things. So it's a really interesting one. And I think, go back to your point, it's always been there's a reason why rich people collect art. It tends to accumulate.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think one other thing is that you mentioned there what else would go forward. I mean, there is association of NFTs with physical things, but it's a little bit more difficult because once you mix the physical and the digital world, provenance becomes harder. No matter what you say, it becomes more difficult. But although there was a big barrel of whiskey sold for $2 million the other day, and it is an
Wow.
NFT. So it's going to be quite a drinking session, that one. But,
Yeah, I'd imagine.
but that's going to happen as well. But the ones I mentioned, they're quite a good quite a good place to start. It's a really interesting and exciting environment if you're interested in art as well.
Yeah, and I've personally been trying to do my own research as far as, NFT art, and it's a subject matter I would like to have a greater understanding of. But I will say, from what I've seen so far, for a lot of the artists who have made a decent name for themselves and at least some sort of broad visibility, they almost always have a Discord channel,
Hmm.
something going on in Clubhouse, like those
Yeah,
chat rooms, and they have like a Telegram channel. Like, so
yeah,
it seems like they have a very engaged community, almost
yeah,
akin to like some of these newer, like, I guess, meme tokens coming out, or
yeah,
other trending cryptocurrencies. So,
yeah.
if I was to write an outline for this based on my research and maybe things I've heard and seen, certainly check out those platforms like Discords and Telegram and
Yeah,
Clubhouse.
and I think there's loads of things that can be done. I mean, if you even look at the stuff that you're doing, I don't know if it's been discussed yet. There's loads of ways to link, smaller environments into the bigger ones, which is one of the
Right.
things that we're looking at. There is quite a way to, because I go to quite a few art galleries 'cause I'm interested in, and I really do like meeting curators and seeing how that stuff works. So go to physical galleries as well if you can. I mean, there's plenty of great ones in Miami and New
Oh
York. I
yeah,
mean, some of the
absolutely.
best. So
Yeah, yeah,
I definitely
absolutely.
spend. I mean, hopefully I'll be over and I'll certainly be spending
Yeah, let
time
me know.
in.
And
But
as far as upcoming projects, what do
mhm.
you have in the works? Anything you're at liberty to discuss?
Well, I kind of muted to it there, but yeah, we're working with some auction houses, so we're kind of looking at the midstream art projects and
Awesome.
some of those kind of artists that are kind of in the mid layer that are becoming a little bit more famous, but have some background also in the physical world, but they've explored other types of things. So we're talking to quite a few, street artists and some other things, and then we're bringing together some tech that we're going to launch with some an auction house as well. So we're looking at that. The really what's been done, but tweaking it a little bit. So as I said, we'll be
Right.
making some announcements around that and NFTs early next quarter. So hopefully people will be linked into that. So
That is awesome. And by the way, you have to give me a shout next time you're coming to Miami and New York. And speaking of art galleries, there is an abundance of great
mm,
galleries between both those cities, to say the very least. In fact,
mm,
earlier, actually this year, New York City opened its first NFT art gallery. I'll get the name for you,
okay,
shortly later today. But Robert, I have to
hmm,
say, it was an absolute pleasure
yeah,
having you on today and really
pleasure.
exploring some of the nuances with NFT art, both on the technological side and I guess you could say on the grading and curating side as well, especially somebody who has firsthand experience into this as well. And I have to say, I don't think NFT art is going to go away. I think we're really just at its start. So I
Mm,
am very curious and very excited to see where it goes to,
mm.
to say the very least.
Yeah, no, no, definitely. I think yeah, it's going to be interesting, and in it for the long term, as far as I can go.
Yes, yes, I hear you there. But again, Robert,
But yeah, thanks again. Thanks, Adam. Thanks for
thank
having me.
you. All right,
Okay.
we'll talk soon.
Talk again. Cheers. Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Take care.